Hey, everybody, it's Michael Martin. Hope you're doing well. So, following on from the last two episodes I've done, I get a lot of feedback from folks, very valuable. I appreciate it very much. Um, Emails, too, people are very frustrated. Now, I get it, I've been there. Frustration is, they say, you know, expectations have built in disappointments, right? And so, what happens when you're trading and everything's going good, and then all of a sudden the market changes, whether you can see it coming or not, but now what you used to do or what you've been doing, what your model might be, isn't producing the results that you want. So now you have an emotional conflict, right, with the market, even though your behavior hasn't changed. Hey, it's not fair. Well, life's not fair. It's the way it goes. So the thing to remember in these times, right? So there's two types of folks that have been reaching out. The folks who haven't quite figured out what their trading strategy is just yet. They're kind of trying a few things on for size. And then, uh, as Hemingway might say, you know, for those the blind that once could see, when your models don't work anymore, it can cause you to start blowing a gasket. And I had one friend reach out and say that he went on tilt. And I was thinking, why would someone do that? Why would someone want to hurt themselves further because another entity? See, I look at the market as another person, even though it's a collection of millions of people, right? You never really know who's on the other side of the trade that you're putting on. I really think of it like another person. So the poker analogy of your, playing your cards, but you also have to play the table, right? You have to play against the other person. At least in poker, you can bluff. You can't really bluff the market. You're better off, for sitting on your hands at that period of time and investigating, because a lot of the things in trading, when you think about it, apply to life. And I get that remark and that comment a lot about this channel. Is like, this stuff is wisdom that's beyond trading. It's really good for life. So when you think about the market as another entity or another living and breathing mechanism, you're kind of having a conversation with that entity in terms of like adding risk or removing risk to your portfolio, right? And then you get to measure the results in real time. You get to ride certain waves, right? So the thesis that I want to focus on today is something that I luckily caught on to very, very early on, because I had been a business person before I got to Wall Street. I had, I had caddied golf bags, I had waited tables, I had run a landscaping company. And so I had to learn with, people not paying on time, people being very demanded all the while, and then how to deal with, personalities, uh, people coming to the restaurant and, demanding a certain type of service, or just being in a bad mood, like for no particular reasons. Like, why are you even going out to dinner if you're such a pissy mood? Golfers who, were not that good, and I caddied for the club champ at one course. He was a very, very good golfer, but they were also well off, and he had Jimmy Ballard as his golf coach. So when you approach the markets without coaching or without being a good student for yourself, your expectations are not practical at that point. I give everybody a lot of credit for showing up every day and trying their hand at something, because if you don't try, it's certainly not going to come up, knock on the door, and come in the door and kick you in the ass. You got to do it, right? You got to do it. So what I started to do, the lucky part was, because I knew I wanted to change who I was as a person and escape the blue collar despair that I had going on in my life, and exchanging my time for money, I knew I needed intellectual property. I didn't know what the hell that even meant in many ways. I didn't know how it applied to me, but I knew as I was going from blue collar to white collar, where I still would have to put in the hours, but I wanted to create an asset. And I had some business experience by the time I got to Wall Street, and I knew about how to prospect. I knew how to get clients. I knew how to, service clients. I knew how to make small talk, make people feel good, because there is that kind of relationship in the consultative sales. What wine would go good with this meal? Um, in the mafia joint, it was just bring me whatever I ask for. So yes, sir. The you in a simple sentence, you have to focus on your process, right? And the process should be based on a couple of things. One is there has to be compatibility. There has to be chemistry between you and what you're doing. It should exhibit positive expected value over thousands of instances, over more than a 10-year period of time, right? You can back test that, right? Now ask yourself the question, if you can back test something and you haven't done it, why? Why? Are you lazy? You just don't, are you cheap? You don't want to go through that because you want immediate results right now. So think about where the frustration comes from, because if you reverse engineer it, you can kind of see, like, if you're lazy or you cut corners or you cut steps, whatever you want to say, this is what happens. Because the revelation in doing the back work, so to speak, can save you a lot of, as we used to say in New York, agita, a lot of heartache, right? For your future endeavors. So what I started to do when I was younger is I got to, caddy for a lot of very well-known people, a lot of people who had made a lot of money on Wall Street, pretty famous names, you would know them. I don't kiss and tell because I'm just not a star fucker. But at the end of the day, I would try to emulate their behavior. Like, okay, what did they do to get where they are? What type of things did they have to accomplish? And it wasn't getting like an MBA or a CFA designation or a CMT. Some of my friends have all that, and it certainly can help. But if you suck, a CMT isn't going to help you. If you can't be decisive, a CFA isn't going to help you. Interesting stuff, right? Getting other licenses, they don't really matter. They're marketing. Those are just licenses like getting a driver's license. You can get your permit, your learner's permit, pass the written test, pass the road test, get your driver's license. You're not a good driver, but you've met the minimum requirement. Like you can reach Mickey's finger to go on certain rides at Disneyland or Disney World in Florida. And so when you don't put the time in to develop your process, it's not like you haven't paid your dues, but your expectations of what you want from your trading are not practical, because putting in time in front of the screen is a false god. Yes, I spoke with Jason Shapiro, and we talked about looking at the screen for 30 years. That's much more material, because now we have millions of instances of conjugating. Like, he uses commitment of traders. You can use ADX. You can use a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't matter to me, where you can see follow through, study the fundamentals, watch what's happening on the chart, and then see what the result is. Is there a convergence or divergence between those two? That takes time. If you listen to the retail hawking bullshit that you see on all the social media about, like, I can teach you my system and you can put it together in 30 days and start making 6 figures a month, that's because you're gullible and you want to believe that bullshit. So that's kind of on you. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise that most of that stuff is a come-on, right? Because they're trying to detach you from whatever their monthly fees are that are always priced in a very reasonable manner, right? That's the point, right? The offer is the asset. It's not the fucking stuff that they're actually selling you. When you listen into the marketing stuff, it's the off to them, to marketers, the offer is the asset. It's not the actual stuff that they're trying to sell you. So in studying, you can study athletes too. A good one is the late Kobe Bryant. He wanted to practice, and this isn't anything new. You can look this up on the internet, so I might ham hock or smash up the actual numbers. But the thing is the process was there, which is the most compelling part. And it was understood that he would get up, at 3 or 4 and start shooting for 2 hours, right? Just doing free throws, doing threes, shooting around the perimeter, and putting 2 hours of work in. Then take a break, maybe eat a light breakfast or something, come back for another 2 hours, right? And that could be, from like 7 to 9 or what have you. Another 2 hours. Then the team practice would be there, right? 10, 11 o'clock. And so by the time the team had practiced, Kobe had put in 4 hours of more work, additional work before his team even got there. And then if I have the story right, I think he actually put in other hours after the team practice. Why was that? Well, inside of his body, he wanted it more. And he knew he had to align his behavior. Someone said that before on this show, behavior predicts where you end up. He had to align his behavior with the results and the things that he wanted to accomplish that he could envision in his mind. Right? Wayne Gretzky, too, very cerebral player. Most of the pro jiu-jitsu guys, too. Jiu-jitsu is a thinking person's martial art. It's not about brute force and strength. That's a part of it, but it's more of a chess match. So, one of Wayne Gretzky's earlier coaches said for him to study a guy named Bobby Clark. You know Bobby Clark because his front teeth were missing. He played for the Flyers. I think he wore 16. He was a center iceman in the 70s. Very good hockey player. Flin Flon, Manitoba in the house, which is really north in Manitoba, which is where Bobby's from. He was probably one of the first diabetics to play that I became aware of, where he had type 1 diabetes as well. And he's had a storied career. I think he's gone on to be GM. But instead of in the days coming out of the Bobby Orr era, Bobby Orr was a hell of a hockey player. I saw him play when I was coincidentally 4, the number that Orr wore, at Madison Square Garden. I saw him. He was a Bruin. Is you'd have these big goon centers. I was a center iceman. In those days, the centers were these bigger guys, and they'd stand in the slot, like looking for rebounds or trying to make a screen in front of the goaltender. And Bobby Clark would be off to the side and kind of playing it that way, maybe seeing more of the ice, being able to look and make eye contact with everybody on the ice. And this coach said to Gretzky, study this Bobby Clark. That's how Wayne started to set up shop behind the goal, the opposing goal, in what slangly had been referred to now as Gretzky's office. So he would actually turn around and face his other teammates, the other 4 players, and the goaltender, I guess, on the other end of the ice, mostly Grand Fuhr, and learn to play that way and set up offensive plays, right? Gretzky had, a multiple more assists than he had in terms of goals, and he was a damn good goal scorer. So this all speaks to like preparation, and I've mentioned on the show before, some of the phrases that speak to that, to how to turn yourself into a winning trader. It really starts with you and your behavior. Like, what are you willing to do besides sit in front of the screen all day, which to me is a snooze. Like, it's hard to learn that way. You do it incidentally, right? When Jason and I were speaking about it, we weren't saying like that was the tuition. We did it incidentally because there wasn't any social media. There wasn't an internet. There wasn't mobile technology. There were no Discords or Telegrams. Like, my goodness. All of that stuff is a Band-Aid. And I don't mean to put you down. It's certainly not speaking down to any of the folks that run them. But those are like membership areas that generate, monthly consistent income. I've always said on this show, to be completely frank with folks, that if I do my job, I make myself obsolete for you. There's no reason to keep coming back in many ways. There's 350 videos. That's a PhD's worth of education on how to mentally prepare. It's called Mind Trader Mindset for a reason. So maybe you don't have what Kobe had or what Wayne had, but what are you doing, right, off the screen to prepare yourself? Are you looking at the data? Because the charts can only show you so much. And to me, you're at a distinct disadvantage if you don't know the math behind what you're actually looking at. Which is, to me, again, this is observable information. It's publicly available. And if you're into stocks, you can get it for free at Yahoo Finance. You can get historical data. And what's the kind of math? Well, not just expected values, but when you look at the moves that you're in, how do you know that 2R or 3R is the place to exit? Did you go back and study like what happened a week later of the trade that you were in? How did it work out? Right? Why would you do this? Well, for the work that you're willing to put in, you're trying to make as much money as possible for not just the work, but for the risk that you're willing to take. So you might as well try to maximize that, right? That would make sense if you know what your R is, your risk unit. How can you maximize your upside? A lot of folks avoid the unpleasant feelings by saying, I got to sell limit. As soon as I put my trade on, I got to sell limit at 3R, which is certainly one way to start. But then you can grow. You could grow. You have to grow from that, right? You have to move away and try something else on for size. You say, okay, let me keep my same risk unit, but maybe I'm now going to, like we talked about last week, I'm going to either trail structure or trail percent. And when it gets to 3R, I'll move my protective stop to 2R, so I know I guaranteed to make money. But maybe if the thing keeps moving, or there's a continuation pattern, right, that shows up on top of my initial entry pattern, I might be in store for a 5 or a 6R. Now imagine that feeling in your body. Don't think about the fear of risking R, because you're willing to do that anyway. Because again, we're thinking about process here, which you can imagine and envision in your brain before you boot up your computer. You probably have the machine on 24/7, so you don't have to boot it up, but you know what I mean. And this is how you mentally prepare. You can envision yourself in that winning situation of taking 6 to 10R winners. Are they as frequent? Depends on your strategy. You really have to look. I can't say for sure. I know in my own history that they have come from longer holding periods. So in all of this too, you have to look at what is the reticence on holding trades overnight or over the weekend. What's the big fear? Look at the charts of the things that you're trading. Again, if your account's underfunded, I get it. You know you're in a tough spot. You know you're underfunded and you're trying to do it anyway. My hat's off to you. But it does. I know guys will disagree with me. Certainly other teachers who are marketing day trading programs, or they're working on a desk and they're doing these training things, I think the fear is unwarranted. So you really have to. I wouldn't let a day trading firm's platform dictate my trading rules. That would never work, right? Because again, there has to be compatibility too. You have to be able to live with my trading style. I can't adopt yours. What the hell's that? Like, who am I? Am I me, or am I some person that you're trying to make me be? So there's a huge amount of conflict in there. And I get that a lot, that someone's paid a couple $1,000s or whatever for someone's training program. The problem is that there was no compatibility. Part of a good chunk of this show is to help you find out that compatibility before it costs you a lot of money, or before you go spending money on buying someone else's trading system. It's like looking at somebody's wife, and I know you shouldn't covet your friend's spouse, but why did they get married and you didn't? It's because of the chemistry and the compatibility. So while you can intellectually, when they say we can teach this to anybody, that's a true statement. But there's a gigantic chunk of it that they're missing out. And it's 90% of it is there compatibility? Now, you might say, I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock and do 2 hours of shooting the perimeter like Kobe did, figuratively speaking. I don't want to look at the data. I don't like math. I don't know how to work spreadsheets. That's fine. You can go to eWork or Upwork. It used to be called Elance. Upwork. You can go to Fiverr. You can find people that can and pay them to do it, to get you the insight. Because then with the insight, you can make better decisions and further along, better develop your process. Because pro traders know, and super performers across any field, sports, entertainment, they have a process down, right? And they're constantly studying their process, because that's how you get and live through the expected value part. If you know what percentage of the time that you're going to lose, you can calculate the probability of you having 3 or 4 losing trades in a row. It might come as a surprise to you. You might not know that, right? Because the losing percent is the complement of the winning percent. So you could also take your winning, say if you win 30% of the time, you can calculate how many, what's the likelihood of having a 3 or 4 trade winning streak. Like, that's all knowable. That's all learnable. And so I think there's not enough off-market research that's being done behind the scenes. I think people, from what I can gather in the emails, is that they're spending all day in front of the screen thinking that it's okay to surf any particular wave. And that's not the case. It's fine if you're going to go, to the ocean and surf that way because you're there for economic utility, otherwise known as pleasure. But for trading, you have to not necessarily be a sniper, but you have to, at the same time, be like a good friend of mine's a fireman out here, and he actually met the president, as his station was in the Palisades, And, they're at the firehouse. All of a sudden, a call comes in and they switch from casual mode, right, to a readiness, a state of preparedness that they train for over and over and over again. And so, as a trader, I think that's what you need to do. But in order to do that, you need to mentally prepare during the off hours. You have to envision what it is that you want and what is it that you're doing it for, because it's not usually for the money, right? It's for self-actualization. It's to build your self-esteem. It's for, all that kind of stuff. Now, over time, that's measured in money, right? Those are the points in the game. But I haven't met too many people who are like, yeah, I'm just doing this for a couple of mil and then I want to get out. There's usually a deeper connection to what it is that they're doing. It's part of who they are. Traders, that's what they do. They're risk managers. And really good traders could really trade across all asset classes eventually, but you have to pick one at the beginning. To use the surfing analogy again, I find like when you don't know what you're doing, anything can look like an opportunity, right? I've said this before on the show, and if you're new here, thanks for being here. That volatility, if you don't know what you're doing, then volatility does not equal opportunity. Because if you don't know your ass from a hole in the ground as far as trading is concerned, you can't have trader envy of someone else who's making money on a particular trade. They might have to wait a month for that setup to show up, right? So now you have to exercise patience. We talked about that. What are the feelings that you have to feel when you have to be patient? Or are you just in a fuck it all kind of attitude where you're just going to put on a bunch of trades to see what happens, expecting really big things, right? So that there's a reality check that needs to go on. Like, what are you doing it for? What is your why? And it's not about making the money. It probably isn't so that you can go on a Discord and brag about your winning trades or take screenshots and put them up on Instagram. No one cares. The only reason I talk about all my losers here is because that's what we can all identify with. It's the one thing that I've got in common with Ed and Michael and Soros and Tudor Jones and all those people is that we've lost a lot of money to learn what we're doing here. The winners, they can show up. I don't think the winners take care of themselves. I think you have to be prepared to win. You can't freak out. You can't lever up your account when you have 2 or 3 winning trades in a row. But focus on a process, get one thing down, get one style of trading down, and learn to live with that for a couple of years. And really own it, because you don't know enough about the market cycles to see how things have changed over time, right? If there's a threat of a recession, how many of you have gone back and looked in the early 90s to see what the markets did during that window of time? Because that data is publicly available. So you have to measure your relative strength of how you want to master your craft with the activities that you're doing and those that you're not willing to do. All right, so I'm not going to be wrapping anyone's knuckles here, but if you don't do the work, you can't expect the results. Kobe was very influenced by Michael Jordan. Michael worked very strongly on both ends of the court, right? He was offensive player of the year. He was also defensive player of the year, right? The guy was the best basketball player I ever saw, even through Kobe and LeBron. You can have all the points you want. Bill Russell has the most rings. He was before my generation where I could really see it. And admittedly, baseball is my sport. So it's like Christmas season. It's like, mid-December right now with opening day coming up. That's what I do. I really don't have time to watch TV, but I'll have it on in the background. And, I appreciate that. So that takes time. That's going to take some time. I would love it if the marketers were actually telling you the truth that you could get this done in a couple of months, but it's not practical. You have to put in the time. And to me, the time is away from the screen looking at the data. You can get the data in CSV format, upload it into a spreadsheet, and start looking at the relationship between the numbers. This will also help you understand how painful it might be for you actually to take small winners, right? Because to me, if you're going to take small winners, you're going to be a small trader for a long time. Whereas if you focus on your process and your account starts to grow, your R will grow proportionally, right? If you're risking 0.5 of 1%, right? Take 100K, One half of 1% is $500. If you go up 50%, now your one half of 1% will go from $500 to 750. So you kind of scale accordingly, right? Always minding what the volatility of the instrument is. I think scaling, which people do way too soon, way before they're actually ready to do so, is problematic, and that gets people into a lot of trouble. So if you take a deep breath and just say, this is a process, my goal is to learn my process. Once I have the process down, now you've got your own little personal formula for Coca-Cola, which is a great place to be, because now you'll never have to work for anybody. Your returns will be variable. You can't predict anything. The markets are, and I think folks are figuring this out right now, right? If you're trying to buy dips in a downward moving market, you're trading against the prevailing overall move where the strength is. The strength is in the sellers right now. They're the ones in control of the market. So you might have been bought, especially the stock index futures, you might have been buying things long and making your money. But now, we're in a different market environment. So you either have to learn how to short sell, or you're going to have to learn to feel your feelings when you have to sit on your hands and not trade and be patient, right? And that might frustrate you, but you learn the hard way by putting on trades in markets that you have no business being in. You walk away with losses and you start scratching your head saying, why am I an idiot? Trust me when I tell you, I've been there. But that comes with maturity, right? You have to have the maturity to know to sit out and wait for the markets to turn. That could be several months, right? If we are in recession land, right? And I don't think the tariffs have been on for 10 minutes. I don't know what Powell is saying, that the recession is because of tariffs. It's too new but that's politics. Politics ruins everything. Just keep that in mind. But that to me should be your ongoing ethos, is how do I get to improve as a human being? How do I get to improve as a person, of which trading is a small part of my life? What is my processes in trading? Can I explain it in one or two sentences to somebody who doesn't know anything about the market and have them understand it? Right? So that's a good litmus test for yourself. Can you explain what you do in one or two sentences without using jargon? And constantly refine that process and make it efficient. How can you get the same results with as fewer moves as possible? Maybe even fewer transactions. How can you hold winners longer and make more money? How do the odds change once you're in a trade? Because you might know that a particular setup has XYZ expected value, but then when you start to think about continuation patterns, what happens to the odds? Like if you're in a trade that's up 2R, what's the probability at that point that it goes to 5R? Again, that's data that you can look at, right? And we do that all the time in the coaching here, is we study the data, so that someone at least has a practical understanding that what they're trying to do isn't going to have the type of payoff that we want, because we can look at the math. You might not see it in the chart because the charts are kind of banal. Well, look at the colors. So that's my advice for this week and probably the next couple of months, is get away from the screen, start looking at the data, work on yourself and process your feelings, right? On what do you do when things don't go your way? You have your whole life's history to look back on and say, well, I asked this person out, they said no, they went out with this guy, the guy was a loser. How did that make me feel? And look at that, because it's all the same. It's all the same. You're running the same emotional model. It's who you are as a person. It's who I am as a person. So we're equals that way. The difference here is that after looking at this stuff, I was born with a strong inner voice. I was very lucky. So I looked at that all the time. And I said, I am not going to let my emotion, this comes from The Godfather, right? Don't let your emotions affect your judgment. Your judgment affects your behavior predicts where you end up. So if you have very, very strong feelings about stuff and you act out on it, you come across as a petulant teenager, and that only hurts you, right? I'm not saying it to be, the ethos of this channel is helpful. For God's sakes, I do it for free. So focus on that. Focus on your inner game, because I don't know a situation in life when you don't focus on your inner game that you don't come out eventually as a winner. And that's what I want to leave you with. Leave your comments. Please click and subscribe if you like this. You could email me. I'll think of potential concepts that I can talk about in future episodes. Thanks for being here. Have a great week.